with a knife video for you. And today I want to follow up, if you will, on a video that I did over the summer where I mentioned the fact that I'm trying to have a few less knives, and I'm working on sort of a core collection made up of knives that are especially significant to me or appealing for some reason. And there were a couple of knives that I was really hoping to add to that core collection back then, and I think I've pretty well filled it out. I'm sitting at a place where, and I'm certainly not saying that this will never change, and certainly I'm not saying that no other knives will be added to this list, but I do have some knives that I feel like are pretty well perfect for me and my tastes, and probably will form sort of a main body of my collection. Other knives may come and go, but I've got a few knives that I think will stick around. And there are a number of reasons for that, and I'll go over some of those reasons as we work our way through the video, and I'll actually share with you what those sort of core knives actually are. But let me begin by just saying, look, really all collecting is subjective. So while I have reasons that these knives hold a particular place, the reasons are not hugely substantial. Okay, if you really think about it, you could probably justify owning sort of an EDC knife, maybe something heavy duty for tactical or outdoors purposes, maybe a gentleman's knife, and then for fixed blades, maybe you'd want a fishing knife, an outdoor knife, a fillet knife, an axe, a hatchet, a machete, and a couple of saws. The blades that fit that actual roll of tools. But outside of those, what have we gone through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So outside of like between 5 and 10 knives that fill specific jobs, right? There's no good reason to own, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 70 knives. Okay, so collecting is going to be subjective in general. That said, there are some requirements that I have, and there are some things that I find especially appealing for a knife that I'm going to own long term. One, I like it to be special in some way. Either it's an outstanding example of its sort of kind. All right, the Inkosi here would be a good example of that, where there are very few things that are just like an Inkosi. The Rat Model 1 is one of those knives that's just so optimized in terms of price and functionality and comfort, and it's just a really well-rounded knife that comes in at a really good price point. Para 2 is a great example of that sort of mid-range, $120. I guess they're maybe 130 something now, or 140 with the Spyderco increases. But again, just a knife that serves as a great example of what it is. Recon 1, same thing. So there's some knives that I think I have around on the channel because they're a great example of something. The knives that I'm going to keep sort of in my core collection that have a special place, they all are going to be knives that I feel comfortable using and carrying. I just find a knife that I can't, think, well, if I had to give away all my other knives, would this one still be functional? If I can't say that about a knife, I likely won't keep it long term. And it has to be something I'm excited to carry. And the main criteria that I was really aiming at when I started sort of developing this idea of a core collection was I wanted to have, between 10 and 20 knives that where every single one of them I could just feel really excited not only to own it but every day to pick it off the shelf and carry it, to where if I shut my eyes and just picked one of these knives, I would be totally satisfied with whatever I picked up and put in my pocket that day. And that was the primary consideration for this sort of core collection that I've been working on. All right, now there are some knives that are in this collection because I think they make great examples for the channel. Let's go ahead now, and this is, maybe I'm not quite done with all my discussion points, but let's go ahead and start talking about some of what I mean here. So, for example, the Rat Model 1, and even the Recon 1, and to a lesser extent the Para. Let's cover these three. The Rat Model 1 is such a great knife for the price, highly recommended. This is one of those knives where if people ask me, hey Kevin, can you tell me, is there a good knife out there that I could pick up? Likely one of my recommendations is going to be a Rat 1 or maybe a Rat 2 if you like smaller knives. For something hard use and tactical and heavy duty, again, there are very few things out there that, especially for the price point, are going to compete with the Recon 1. Yes, it's more expensive, but this is going to be tough as nails and really will take a beating. to a greater extent than many of the knives out there that are really marketed as hard use. And these are, under $100, which is fantastic. And then finally, for just a nearly perfect all-around EDC knife, the Para 2 gets my nod. And again, that's going to be one that I would highly recommend for lots and lots of situations. Now, I will say one of the things that I have to qualify this video with is I would not, okay, don't take this video as a full-fledged endorsement of every single one of these knives. These knives are perfect for me, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them for everyone. All right, yeah, the Rat Model 1, these three knives, yeah, if you're looking for something that they're suitable for, I would absolutely recommend them. But probably the knives I find myself recommending the most often are actually the Cold Steel American Lawman. Now, I may have to back off of that. I will eventually try a flat ground American Lawman. My American Lawman is a hollow grind, and I love it. It is nearly a perfect folding knife. It really is fantastic. And I recommend it a lot because I know not everyone wants knives as large as I do. The other knife that I recommend a lot is the Code 4 because it's a knife that you can carry, it carries really, really easily and lightly, but you can carry it as a dress knife or as a more of a tool, right? It looks really classy, but if you go out in the bush and you need to process some wood, you can still do it. So those are probably my two most recommended knives when people ask me. And then we get into other areas as people are more specific with their expectations. So this video is not primarily me recommending these knives. It's me telling you what my core collection is and why they appeal especially to me. Now, if you have very similar tastes to me, sure, you would probably be very happy with most of the knives you're going to see in this video. And I will put a link to DLT Trading where you can go and pick up one or two of those. All right. So let's get these guys out of the way. I think I've kind of gone over the place that they hold. And this video is going to be really, really long if I don't get moving. I would say at this point, pretty well my favorite knife designer is Andrew Demko. And so I've got a couple of cold steels. There are two reasons that I like these knives. One, this is a fantastic example of just a great user of a knife. It's extremely well put together. It's the nicest action that I have on any cold steel with the exception of maybe this one, but even this one is different because of the weight of the blade. The 8010 is really a standout in the cold steel lineup. The 8015 is fantastic as well and definitely satisfies the ingenuity part of my knife love, but this one is, every time I get it in hand, this is a fantastic knife and really, really holds a special place. The 4MAX, this is a great knife to have in the collection because there are very few things out there like this. This is truly a tank of a knife, right? This takes, the ZT moniker, a real beast, and embodies it. Okay, like this is a beast. It is a tank of a knife. And the best thing about it is, well, it's huge and tough and durable and listen, this is one of those knives where I really would almost feel as comfortable with this as I would any fixed blade. And this I think would work really well as a fixed blade design. It's also, it cuts really, really well. And it doesn't carry well. It's big and heavy, but I carry it pretty frequently and it's not impossible to do. But what I love about this is you've got this massive tank of a knife and it slices, okay? The edge geometry is really, really nice on this knife. And that is something that for me is a must. All right, I'm not going to give you a pass on a knife that won't cut well because you're saying, well, we wanted it to be really tough and durable. Well, good, make it tough and durable, but it has to cut stuff, otherwise it's not a knife. And this is just a great example of what I'm talking about along those lines. Now, I know some of you want to see some of the higher end stuff, so let's get into some of that. I'll come back. Actually, no, let's pull in the two Benchmades first, and then we'll move over to some of the more tactical stuff. So this is the Benchmade Contigo. This is the Benchmade Crooked River, and both of these are kind of unique examples of what they are. This is the KnifeWorks exclusive in M390 with the layered G10. This is a standard Crooked River, but then with upgrades from Rogue Blade Works with some marbled carbon fiber on the scales and the pivot collar, as well as a blue backspacer. I do have a marbled carbon fiber backspacer for it, but I like to leave the blue one in there just for a little bit of added color. Both of these knives, again, they're extremely useful. They're really, really well put together. And they're knives that inspire, in me at least, a lot of confidence. I would compare either one of these fairly well to the Recon 1, and they hold a similar place. They both cost a little bit more. Now, I will say the Contigo, the deal that you can get on those right now, if you go with the KnifeWorks exclusive, maybe they've all sold out, I don't know, but I think you can still get some of those. This is really, really spectacular. Okay, let's get those guys out of the way. And some of the knives here are admittedly fairly high end. And I know that doesn't appeal to everyone, but it appeals to me. And so we're going to take a look at some of these. So first up is the Curtis F3. I've recently had a Curtis Cruise as well, and I like the Curtis Cruise. I like the overall design language of Curtis knives, but this is the one for me. It's big, it's heavy duty, it has really enjoyable action, and one of the things I love most about this knife is the blade grind. It's got fairly substantial blade stock, nice tough tip, but it's hollow ground here so that when you go to cut something, it slices really, really well. And you know, we've talked about this before, but hollow grinds are going to cut much, much nicer in almost all circumstances than a flat grind. They're very rare. I mean, let's say this. I can barely think of a reason that I would drive this blade into something, okay, and then start prying it this way. Right? You don't need that kind of strength in a knife very often. And if you do, then this knife accommodates that by having a nice hefty tip there. So you could push this in and wiggle it around a little bit and be fairly comfortable doing that. But when you're actually cutting something, you've got that hollow grind to do that cutting very, very nicely. Now, let's see here. We've got, oh yeah, this one we need to talk about. So this is the WE 037. This has been in a number of videos recently. This is a knife that I think I thought long and hard about this, okay? I wanted to keep either this or the Malice because WE Knives does a great job, and I wanted to have one in the collection for comparison purposes. And ultimately, I decided on this one for a very particular reason. And that is the practicality of this knife is almost as optimal as any folding knife could possibly be. Yes, it's a high-end titanium frame lock. Yes, it checks all of those enjoyable high-end boxes, but it's also incredibly light for its size, right? It's almost as if someone challenged WE Knives or challenged the designer here, and I'm trying to think of his name. Someone please put it in the comments, like you did last time. Challenged someone to make a knife. It's like, can you make a 9-inch knife that only weighs 4 ounces, right? Can you make a knife that has a fantastic blade to handle ratio? Can you make a knife that carries as if it's not even there, but is still solid, still has great I mean, everything that you want a knife to do well, this really, really does, and does it beyond well. Okay, so would I like a large but very lightweight knife? Yes. Well, there's nothing as big and as light as this out there. When you get it in hand, it feels like it's just perfectly molded to a human hand. And then when you go to cut stuff, you've got this very high flat ground blade, not crazy thick blade stock, so this cuts really well. All right, now back to my old, hollow grind versus flat grind. Does this cut as well as it would if it was a hollow grind? No, it doesn't. But it's such thin blade stock that, I mean, it's not crazy thin blade stock, but it's thin enough that it still cuts exceptionally well. So this is just a knife that is nearly a perfect example of what a good folding knife should be, and it nails everything to such an extent that I just felt like I needed to keep it around because it serves as a great comparison in so many different ways. All right. And so I do think WE Knives has really done something spectacular here. And if you're watching, I could see a small version of this doing really, really well because it's just so good. Now, make sure you don't mess up the handle. It needs to be just as comfortable. That's one of the things that I often find with smaller knives is when you get less handle real estate, they lose some ergonomic points. So don't lose the ergonomics, but offer this in a slightly smaller version, and I think it would be a win. Anyway, the WE 037 is staying in the collection because it's just such a fantastic example. Then we've got a couple of classics here. Both of these, again, are knives that I love. I've had a number of Chris Reeve knives. I've had a 25, I've had a 21, and I've had two Inkosis. And I sold one Inkosi specifically thinking that what I wanted to do was get one with the micarta inlay. And it took me a while, okay? I ended up doing that via the 21 Doppler, which was a beautiful knife, but it was a knife I was a little nervous about using. And so ultimately I got rid of it and did what I was initially intending to do, which was get a version with the micarta inlay. And so now I have that, and to me, this is the best thing that Chris Reeve Knives makes. I adore this knife, and it does. Look, when it comes to high-end knives that are really made to be an heirloom, there is nothing that comes close to Chris Reeve. They really are built with the idea that let's make a knife that can just last forever. And let's give it a warranty such that it can be like brand new for for the full lifetime of its existence. Like, they really do a fantastic job of offering something truly spectacular. And so this guy is sticking around. Now, the Hinderer, it's maybe a little less refined. I don't know if I could really sustain that argument. It's definitely a little more heavy duty, and in hand feels like, okay, I've got something a little more substantial that's maybe not designed to be quite as refined as the Chris Reeve. I've got to say though, this is a Gen 4, and this is a stiffer detent than any Gen 4 that I have seen, and so because of that, it just has great action. It really, really does. Let me see if I can show you. There you go. Look at that. Just drop shut action. Solid as a rock in terms of blade play. So, I mean, any knife, I suppose you could take almost any Hinderer and mess around with the pivot to where, it had a little bit of blade play and then it was very smooth. But this doesn't have any blade play. The detent is quite stiff. And it's, then, of course, I love the green and the copper. Fantastic handle combination. This came from a fellow Canadian, and I actually handled this knife long before buying it. Now, he invested a fair bit of money in this knife and probably lost a little because of the fact that when the current generation of Hinderers came out with the tri-way pivot, all the other generations lost quite a bit of value. A knife like this, and by the way, guys, the value I think on these is really good right now. So a knife like this, you can pick up on blade forms for like 325, 350. Of course, that's going to be used. But that's amazing for the quality of knife you're getting, and that's so on the used market. There's very few things that are going to beat the value on a Hinderer. Okay, so those are in the collection, and let's grab the last two. And I may make a special video just about these two. In fact, I eventually will do so. These were the last two knives that I was waiting to add to the collection here to kind of round things out. This, of course, is a Shigorov F95, recently put up the first impressions on this. This has had some use on it. This has been loved, but it's still in great shape and has many, many miles to go. And I mean, even if, let's say something goes wrong, I can always send this to Shigorov, and I'm sure they'll take care of it for me. But very, very attractive knife, nice and light, great feel in hand. And of course, being a Shigorov, it's got that wonderful Shigorov action that we've all come to expect. Moving to the Koenig Arius, again, I did a whole discussion video on this knife where I just talked about why are these so wildly popular, and it's because they really are just dialed in so well. TJ Schwartz has the design here, and Koenig's shop is turning out exceptionally high quality pieces at a reasonable price, guys. A standard Arius with no flare, no special materials or lightning pockets or anything crazy going on. I think you can still get one for like $525, which is very, very reasonable. And there's a reason there's such high demand. Now, lately, they've been putting out a bunch of higher end stuff, and that's great. And the higher end stuff sells really well as well for them, which is fantastic. Okay, but for me, a knife like this is going to be a user. And these are two knives. There's really one other knife that I would add to this, but it's a little small for me, which is why these two are here and not it. I would compare these and a Holt Spectre. Now the standard price on a Spectre is $700 these days, which is pretty steep. Now, and I know that's the same price for the Shigorov, so not, I don't think it's outlandish that they're asking that kind of money. And certainly if you're someone who, let's say you look at the 95 and think that's crazy big, I could never carry a knife that huge. Um, Boy, it would be if I was looking for something a little smaller with, a 3¼ inch blade or so, the neon light and the Holt Spectre would be neck and neck. And for somebody out there, I don't know, I'm trying to think if I know anybody who for sure has an example of both. And I can't think of anybody, but if you're watching this and you have a Spectre and a neon light, I would love to see a comparison video of that. Or if you're watching this and you have both and you wouldn't mind lending them to me, I'd love to make that video as well. So that represents my core collection right now, and it's a little justification for why I have all of the knives that I do in that core collection. I'm going to try to get them all on screen here. I don't think it's going to work, but that's not going to stop me from trying. So let's move this right over to the edge, so even if part of them are missing, I can fit a few more in. Yeah, we're still got quite a few knives to fit in this picture, and we're not going to make it. So we'll start to pile them up a little. Oh, wait. Look, guys, I made a huge error. I didn't talk about the Reeve Torrent yet, so I'm going to leave those other knives here. But the Reeve Torrent is absolutely in my never will leave my side collection. Here's why. For around $300, I think you can find these used for around $275, probably, give or take, depending on condition. Brand new, I think they're $325, maybe $350, but they're still pretty reasonable. And for that price point, which is considerably less than, say, something like this or this, you are getting something that is pretty well as good. Okay, I can note it, there's a slight difference in refinement on those more expensive models, but it is so close, guys, that it's really impossible to justify the extra cost. So I have to say, this knife is here because of the fact that I find this to be one of the best examples of high-end knife making. It really has all the things that we spend money on, right? When we want something crazy and just fantastic, this really optimizes all of that and does it at a pretty reasonable price point. Okay, so that's why this is on the list. And then finally, we've got to bring this guy back in. So there is the Formax. Okay, so that, guys, represents my core collection and a little bit of a justification for each of them. Yes, I have other knives, and yes, there are other knives that I like. And here's how I want to close this out. Okay, and that's to say this. There are thousands, at least hundreds, okay, of not just good, but great knives. And if you ask me how I know because I've tried most of them. I really have. I've reviewed something like, between 600 and 700 knives at this point, and there have been many great knives. All right. The problem that creates is, I would want to keep all the knives that I really think are great, but I would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of knives, like to the point that I wouldn't have room for them all. And so the first thing that I want to say is, if it doesn't, whatever knife you have and are carrying right now, it's probably fantastic. It really is, because there are tons of great knives out there. Okay, and I've reviewed tons of great knives. And so the first thing I want to say is, just because these are my favorites doesn't mean they have to be your favorites. All right, there are all kinds of fantastic knives out there, and I have enjoyed so many knives, and I will continue to check out and enjoy all kinds of great knives. Now, what that means, because there are so many great knives, the pursuit of keeping them all and having a great, I used to review a knife and think, this is so good, I've got to keep it for examples on the channel. And for a while, I ended up with like 100 knives, just thinking, oh, this one's fantastic, that one's fantastic, I can't get rid of it. But eventually I realized, one, in a video, I can't bring in 100 examples. I can't bring in 100 comparisons. And two, I don't want to, okay? I would like to just have and sort of keep as my core collection the knives that really connect with me. And so that's what these represent. And these by no means represent me saying that all the other knives I've reviewed are second tier or anything like that. I've loved many of the knives that I have reviewed, and the fact is you just can't keep all the knives that you love. That's the reality of it. At least for me it is. Maybe you have a whole room in your house that you can dedicate to knives, and therefore you can keep all the knives you love. Great for you. Uh, what I would ask you is, do you have a core collection like this? What are the knives that for you just fill out that portion of your collection that is just near and dear to your heart that you never want to get rid of? And I would say this pretty much does it for me. There might be some changes. I'm still on the fence about whether this guy stays or whether he gets replaced with an F3. We'll see over the next few months what I decide to do about that. But otherwise, this is really sort of the best of the best in terms of what appeals to my knife buying desires. All right, thanks for watching. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this stuff, and I'd certainly like to hear what your sort of top tier knives would be. If you were going to make a video like this, what would you put on it? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to use my link to DLT. We'll talk to you soon.